Okay. Got it. Let me share my screen.
Joaquín está ubicado físicamente en Calgary. I'm just saying that you're here in Calgary.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah. So, do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, no. First of all, thank you very much, Gabriel, for nice introduction, and thank you for inviting for this. I have gone through some of the SOVG sites, been very good talks, and I'm sorry I missed some of the previous months, but I did go through last 2 or 3. So yeah, thank you again inviting. I'm just gonna share some of our experiences and then some of the last 10, 20 years of the work we just do what we have related. We will be focusing mainly on South America, and but actually the trying to correlate why we use reservoir characterization and why we how we can reduce the risk using the reservoir characterization processes. So some of the examples which we can, and thanks for the clients who are able to be able to show some of the things. So let's start from there. So my talk will be outlined starting with the introduction of exploration risks or development risks, and then reservoir characterization, how to de-risk, and then we go with the direct hydrocarbon indicators like AVO inversion, those, followed by, let me put a pointer. So then pre-stack inversion, applications of fault and fracture detection, charge and seal risk, how the chimney analysis can reduce that, and the source rock maturation and various pore pressure prediction, because the risks couldn't be drilling risks in these. So overall, I'm just going to cover example by example. So I'm not going to be too much into theory because otherwise we will be spending the whole afternoon. And so and then finish up with the spectral decomposition and facies, how integrate and how you can use other attributes to make it play-based. So let's start with just showing where we are. You know where we are, but this is the so mainly focus a lot in Colombia, but Llanos Basin, Putumayo, Ecuador, Orinoco, no, Oriente Basin. Although I would consider all that equivalent to one Western Canada sedimentary basin, like, all these plains. But the foothills and Lower Magdalena Valley, which have been focusing for a long time. In Argentina, Neuquén Basin mainly, of course, San Jorge Basin is there, but then we don't have any example yet to show. So that would be the examples, right? So now I want to define the risk before going into the more detail. So we all saw this diagrams of the risk analysis. The discoveries are only made here. That is no longer true. The discoveries are made within the source rock, even if you don't have seal and trap and don't have the reservoir. So it has been source is the most important. It is becoming the bigger circle in the reservoir risk, but that's without going into unconventional. In a conventional way, you need to reduce all these risks in order to get a successful well. But that is not the only thing. There are other risks, like, you have abnormal pressures. You may not be able to get into the reservoir or reach the reservoir, what you are trying to reach. And then you have commercial volumes risk, like, so how big, offshore you have to be bigger than TCF or something like that, or bigger than 100 million barrel. So there are volume risk which are sometimes ignored because we say, oh yeah, there is a AVO effect, but we don't have the volume. So then there is risk of data and limitation. So each of the processes are so have various limitations, but understanding that limitations and understanding the data and human bias. So you have to unbias yourself, as well as you have to have a bigger team to unbias the risk. Like, so otherwise you get too much inclined with one tool. Like, okay, yeah, this work here, and then you get a failure. But understanding from the failures. So that are the risk assessment. Now, what tools we have? Like, so software and mindware. We say, okay, our tools are not only software, it is the experience and the mindware and understanding within each other. So we use a broader toolbox and we try to integrate, but not always all the integration is there. You are part of a smaller, doing a small function in a bigger team. So coming from the seismic side, we focus a lot on the pre-stack work in order to add that value, which post-stack work may not bring in, or could have additional value. So we have to combine those post-stack attribute work to the pre-stack attribute work in order to optimize our best analysis and integrate with the geology. So geology more on the petrophysics, rock physics, and so modeling, well-log correlations, all that, and seismic interpretation, and those coming back into the what called now it's called machine learning, but we have been using it for last 20 years. I call it neural networks. We can call it machine learning, or the older single layer model, which was neural networks. So we will stick on with neural networks, not that much on machine learning. So give you a little bit of history on the quantitative interpretation side. So quantitative interpretation starting, we would say the inversion thing start with seismic inversion. This is one of his paper from Roy Lindseth. I met him when he was 90. So I worked with him, and I had like, God bless, like, give him a good place in heaven. He was the big push to start that inversion, or called the synthetic trace model. So this is all hand colored. If you remember, he had it like all these contouring and coloring by hand and printed. And so that is where the inversion started. But then AVO at the same time, and then you have spectral decomposition, fluid factors, and you have AVO classes coming to the Poisson's reflectivity, and various other methods to try to skin the same thing, is by multiple ways of investigating the data. But the basic solution remain quite simple, as well as going into the complexity, how the data could be acquired better, and all things have changed over with the time, with 3D and various azimuth acquisition and multiple, like many other things. But so let's go with the deterministic quantitative interpretation. Now, from the South America, let's start with the Lower Magdalena Valley, or let's start with the AVO. Basically, start of AVO, as Smith and Gildo and all these AVO originally came with the, although it was always called AVO, but it's really AVA, which is the amplitude variation with angle. So angle of incidence is the important part. And what happens is that it convert to shear wave, convert back to the P wave, and you have, based on the interface, you have a change in the reflection based on the angle. So if you have gas versus these, you're away from the background. Originally, the model was much simple. Like, okay, there is one background, and then if you're away from the background. But that is not really true, but we will come back to that later. So the gas sand, usually gas have the highest AVO response, while oil also sometimes. It depends on the type of porosity, and the oil may fall in between gas and the shale brine background. So for all of the classes are pretty much the same, because they are away from the background. It's just happened to be which quadrant you fall. That's why we call them class 1, 2, 3, and 4. But it's basically continuation, and I will show you that. So looking at the modeling side, like look at this sand one from Lower Magdalena Valley, like so Senegal de Oro sand, that how the sand based on the thickness and based on the oil and based on the gas versus water. So if there is a brine sand with a high porosity with a good thickness, it will also show the AVO. And that's what you can see on the modeling, that you have a AVO response, which is class 3 AVO or class 2, 2.5 AVO, depending on where you are in this modeling curve. You have the dark blue coming, and it still have the gradient. So it would have a class 3 or class 2 AVO, but it just the intercept would be different. So gradient may be exactly the same, but the intercept is the main thing to look for. And that is the key to intercept, is where you start seeing the intercept, because if you are here with a very low porosity or low thickness, you may not see the intercept and separation between them. And you can have a highest separation with no change in gradient. So you can have a gradient which would be similar, a positive gradient would be similar, but with very big difference in the intercept. So you can get confused between one sand being lower porosity could have the gas sand fall in the same as the wet sand with the high porosity. So you need to really calibrate all the time. Like, so it's not only one time, not only calibrate all the time. So that's the main thing what we do with many of the work. Like, so what you see is this one well, it have a sand not nearly the top, but there is a sand top and base with top of the Senegal de Oro, but the one which have shown that it is thick enough to show the response of the class 3 AVO right on the top of the sandstone. You can see as a model, that's what it's supposed to look like. And then at the base, you have a big amplitude change. Although the sand is finished, but you have a big amplitude change. And that is what seemed to be what called the response of the flat spot. So that is why I brought this specific to understand that this was what you see on the migrated stack, a big amplitude within that that sand. And then you have the flat spot where the red line I put it. So the big amplitude change, and that is matching the spill point. So that is where the important part is, that you don't only believe on one AVO anomaly or these, but you need to really see that if it is correlate to the spill point, because you have to have a sand against a shale in order to trap it. And this is just a cross. And then when you see on the fluid factor, you see a anomaly. Now, explaining the fluid factor, you can derive it from AVO and intercept and gradient, and you can derive it from the RPRS cross plot, which is usually used. So how much you are away from the background, and that is what we call, you can do RP minus 2RS, or you can have a various variations of RPRS combination in order to get that, or AVO between A plus B. You can add A to B with a different scaling ratio. So that called scaled Poisson's ratio. So all those can be in various ways how you can display much better. The most importantly, the AVO response of a high porosity gas sand is the typical class 3, which was all the AVO was during the Gulf of Mexico and all that investigation back in 90s and these. But now it is being calibrated and then still use the old way. So that is example. But if you now go into the various combinations, you have the problem of various shales. shale types, high impedance shale, low impedance shale, what is the overburden, what is the underlying, how thick the sand is. So all these things, this is after the fact when you got the well. But before, can you anticipate before what is going to happen? And that is where comes the inversion and lambda rho mu rho to separate out, try to find the interval attributes. Remember, the AVO response was just the interface from the top, like what is happening at the top of the gas, and that is even thinner, a little bit thicker, or how much thick. Now that goes into more detail, what type of sand, like how much saturation, like, so you have a low saturation, high saturation, depending on lambda rho mu rho, you have zero. These are porosity trend, 10-20% porosity with the high saturation, which separate out as the lambda rho. So lambda rho become the fluid factor. So this is where this example comes in. Now, before going there, so we can use that to calibrate our inversions and repeat after the next well. There will be surprises, and then you repeat after that. So that is a one inversion work which we have used a lot in Lower Magdalena Valley as well, because of the gas peering zones, and with many of the clients there. Now, coming to some of the structural plays with the amplitude anomalies on an oil basis. This is from Middle Magdalena Valley. We use what in the post-stack, because pre-stack data on a highly structural domain might not be very good to do the AVO work and those things. So you might want to get into the post-stack amplitudes, because you're condensing and azimuth based, and so you can call this technology, it's called the common contour stack or fluid contact finder. So you're trying to find, by stacking along the contour lines, you are trying to stack on a structure and see if there is a definite change in amplitude. And that's what we see in the case of Middle Magdalena Valley, one of the field. You see a certain change, and it matches with the actually, in this case, we have a AVO anomaly on that, showing the truncation as well. So that's coming with the post stack. So you can double calibrate it back to these things. So again, calibration is important, and those. So now we jump to the south of the South America, in Argentina. We work on the east, what called the external platform of the Neuquén Basin, working with the in the area of the east. You see the dolomite and carbonates, like you map the dolomites and carbonates, and this is the inversion from the gathers, trying to see the wells and tie the background. What you see is the on the background you have the actual log, and the seismic responses or inversion solution is right on the top. So you have a mismatch somewhere here. You see error. So on the error volume will give you the understanding that how it is, how good it is, and your inversion, and then you go find out why it is so. And there are various. You condition the gathers, you do the model, and then backup inversion again. So various inversions will. So by changing a lot of inversions would not affect if your gathers are bad. So you go back to the gathers and really model either full waveform modeling in the case of higher angles, but at lower angles you can just do basic pre-stack modeling. So that becomes the way. So looking at the results, you can see now we can differentiate the basal carbonate layer with a very high low porosity, and then you have the dolomitized layer with with the porosity, various indicators of porosity, and as you go from tight to the porous sand. So this is the P impedance inversion, and then you work with the density inversion. So if you have a good angles and those, you can come up with a good density contrast. So you can actually see the change from shaly to the where the porosity pockets are in the upper of the I couldn't pronounce, but it's in the upper part of the of the carbonates. So now I'm going to flip from the direct hydrocarbon indicator to the fault and fracture analysis. And in the fault and fracture detection, what we use now, although 10 years ago, it was a lot of volume curvature and those things from petrol, there were various attributes like a hand tracker, and those came in. But now more and more people are using thin fault likelihood, and we were part of the quite a bit of research in that. And Colorado School of Mines did quite this wave phenomena, Chinming, and this. So worked on these fault likelihood. What it is, it's actually a probability of having something as fault, and it uses geological criteria rather than the simply coming from the seismic. So you have geological criteria of the certain azimuth and certain dips to have the higher probability. So you can see this from the Llanos Basin, one of these, that the change within the shale above is quite hectic. Like you have a change from one system to a strike slip movement or a sinistral strike slip change, which actually depict itself, but very hard to pick. But if you pick at a single fault, it would not do justification for all the trapping which happens within this. And then you have a fault shadow problems, and then those things, you have some vertical shifts which you cannot explain because it happens below the shale, right where the shale changes. So there is a velocity pull-ups in those. So there is a lot more to learn from these faults and the actual geology. But when you look closely, you have the edges of some of the various edges, but you have a fault system with possibly the back shadow of the uplift, but then you are converting that, and this is the zone of the completely shift from the change. But as the fault likelihood will bring it out, there are these channel edges which comes as a low probability of fault, but these are the main faults. So looking at using this fault behavior, you can have your risk of the faults being continuation, where it is sealing, where it's not sealing, what lithology is on the upper side and downside is going to be changing through. Now, and going back to the middle Magdalena Valley, you have the same thing. You might not have a very good image, but the fault likelihood will bring up the actual faults versus all the low density noise around it. So you actually start seeing how the compartments could be between the production, how the compartments are. This is from the Lesama sandstone, how it is compartmentalized. So now we go into another area called the charge and seal risk. Like, so risks with where the migration and the seal capacity of these various. So that's a phenomenon which is actually quite a bit worked by DGB Earth Sciences as well as us, as what is the chimney analysis or chimney to find that how the traps are leaking. So in Norway, they found out like about 20 years ago that there are gas clouds which you can see on the top of the oil and gas plays which are in the shallow area, which called as the chimneys, or there could be trap leaking, which could be extensive seal risk. And so seal integrity and having integrated these. So remember, all the oil and gas fields do leak. They just leak in the phases, and they leak over time with the lower density hydrocarbons, still leak through many of the seals, except the salt one have a difficulty like leaking. But over time, there are as pressure increase, seal get breached, and then you get back seal again. So the seal can be breached, and now we are finding it more and more with carbon sequestration, how these are some of the failed carbon sequestration projects are showing that seals are temporary and have certain capacity. So looking at the chimney processing, it gives you the full petroleum system, like understanding, like say, this is from Gulf of Mexico, the salt dome, and going up to the deep reservoir, going to the chimney, flowing the from the deep, and then you have the shallow reservoir or paleo mud volcanoes. You can see the older pock marks, and then going to leakage, and could be surface expression of the seepages. Like this is under the ocean floor seepages. But then you can put it together, the whole petroleum system, using this migration attributes. And actually chimney is a combination of attributes, which we can talk about. So gas chimney analysis can actually put the petroleum system together. So now we look at another example of just extensive fault system, where you have the chimneys showing at different parts of the world. Part of these uh, different parts of the leakage happening at the intersection of various faults. So that would be the like chimneys coming up, breaching these mainly for the top of salt domes. And then you have a leakage at the fault intersections. And then you have sealing faults where you don't see the leakages. And it's yeah. So going next, so you can actually not only see that somehow my slide got affected, but with this you can also see along the faults some of the paleo pock marks and how the leakages happen. So faults are not always like they are sealing and leaking at different parts of the fault. So there can be like a sequence. That's the study was published by Norwegian, some of the geophysicists, were that they can map along the faults how the leakages happen. They are not exactly, they could be on the various bunch of what called the leakage pock marks. And that's why the pock marks do happen at a certain sequence of things. They're not all together leaking, because that's how the earthquakes and those things happen. You have a burst of the leakage system. So coming to the Llanos Basin, you can see now there was one study we did a while ago, was the how the migration to the east of the Meta Fault versus the west of the Meta Fault. So with or I call it Meta Fault because along the Meta River, you have the fault system, or actually stratigraphic change from deeper zones being finished there with the porosity, Gachita or Mirador and those. And then as you go to the east, you only have Carbonera sitting on the basement in many times. But this is the fault system which actually do a vertical migration into the eastern side of the Meta Fault. So that was just understanding based on the 2D lines from ANH that there is a possibility that migration, that's what would happen into the lower part of the Carbonera, especially for the Rubiales field and those, or further east, some of the movement of the migration. But actually it is the path of the water which goes through these systems and then changes it to heavy oil as the migration. So as another studies from the Orient Basin back into the Ecuador is showing, actually that study with David Connolly did a bunch of work to this study that how the source rocks migration coming from the deeper source rock as into these things. And that is for, I'm not that much familiar, but Palo Azul field and Pata field were both showing the chimney effect with the cloud at the top of the Palo Azul field as it breathed through from the deeper incursion, with a minor field with the Pata 6 showing very smaller effects, but still had the migrations. So migration effect on structural things that reduces that risk of the migration into the reservoir. So not only four-way closure is there if there is a indication that it got oil migrated into it and it's not breached, then that could be the spill point. If you can map the spill point, that would be the very impressive. So that's the same in the Nokoan Basin. There is a source rock. So David Connolly and others, and actually they published the book, and that you have base smallest source and you have the surface seepage at the surface. So they were trying to connect the surface seepage all the way back to which the source rocks are, and that is where the chimney analysis brings. So chimney is actually going back. What chimney is? It's a vertical migration pathways or just the disturbances what you see on the seismic. But it's not only, it have a qualification of certain qualification to certain attributes which are vertically, so coherency is one of the attribute, and then frequency attenuation is the another attributes. And so a lot of seismic attributes are used in order to reduce that, to come up with the probability of the migration. Now you have to again justify it, that is it not noise, it is not the certain. So you have to keep on trying with the various obvious ones to the less probability, like less probability of these things are there. The yellow is the highest probability. And so now one more thing which I was recently doing in rock physics study and those, and then I go to the Janos example of the facies, the source rock maturation. So source rock maturation, it's a new area because of the unconventional. We are targeting high TOC source rock. I know Colombia is very difficult to be because of the fracking bans and those, but there are places where the high TOC, but even if you don't have the fracking system, understanding the source rock and it's how much mature it is gives you the play fairway. And so play fairway, you require, like, you can use what called the delta log R, which is mean that log resistivity versus the sonic slowness. If you put them together, you would see that mature source rock which deviate from a straight relationship. And that means your slowness, a high slowness, which means slower velocity, and high resistivity creates a gap, and that is usually ties with the calibrate with the source rock evaluation with the night reflectance or to get the understanding. So that's been more study in the rock physics side for here. And as we saw the lambda rho mu rho, you can actually take the lambda rho and it have a very straight correlation within the shales because lower the lambda rho, the higher the TOC. So that is a straight relationship, which is where you've been. I presented that recently last year in rock physics conference, that this is the relationship which you can use to find the source rock maturation. So not only the source rock being present there, it's like also mature. So there is also another study combining that with the source rock being immature to mature, that you start seeing the expulsion from the source rock. So in this case, this is the local fluid migration activity, or you would start seeing the changes in the seismic signature based on the maturity of the source rock and its leakage. And then if you can correlate it with the chimneys back, then you have a better idea of the whole migration pathway or basin modeling. So understanding the risk in that way is this. Now at the end, I will move toward the like one more example of pore pressure prediction is the drilling risk. So we did from the drilling risk, you have that, although you have a good reservoir, how to reach it, not like Macondo, or God forbid, like something happen. And that's what exactly pore pressure is very important, not only on the offshore, but it's onshore as well, because you could lose circulation, you could lose your well, you could have a multiple site strike and going into the getting stuck, because your window can become very narrow between lost circulation and the kicks. You become very narrow window, and you may run out of number of casings which you can put in. Very nice, this hand diagram. I stole it from the internet, but that that is. But we do a lot of pore pressure work to find out. So again, pore pressure, then this is the case from the just close to Cusiana-Copiaga complex, that you can see the variation by velocity inversion. You can check where the fault integrity, how to approach angle going into a reservoir which is below with multiple fault system coming into handy, and then pore pressure reaching the reaching your instability. So how much stable the well path is, because you can you want to make sure that you are stable, you're across. If you are going into very narrow window of the pore pressure, then this well was drilled now successfully after 2 tries of unsuccessful wells, but anyway, there are a lot of possible help from the seismic as a inversion support. Now I will finish up with a few examples of the understanding the geological perspective. So that is one bigger thing, is that can you understand the geology using the mainly using facies analysis and spectral decomposition. So that are some of the Llanos Basin examples, and I will show. So starting with the spectral decomposition, you can take any 3 bands at different frequency bands like 20 hertz, 40 hertz, and 60 hertz, and with different colors, and combine them together to find if the channels are all shining on each of the color. So you are actually using 3 frequencies by decomposing the actual signal, and then combining them together to look at the geology, or more finding the tuning of each of the features. Each feature tune at different, depending on their thickness, depending on these effects, thin sands, thick sands, they all tune at a different level. And there could be point markers, and they could be affecting only one frequency, like red. In the case of 60 hertz, you have this red channel, which means it's much thinner, but it's not seen much in the blue and green band. So it's a multispectral band analysis. So that is very powerful. And or you can take an interval around and then use the facies analysis, or called waveform facies. So in waveform facies, you can actually detect those channel system with the blue being very thin versus the thick effect of the red system overwhelming, and then you have a blue thinner effect coming here. So it is more about placing the channel systems on top of each other and going through. Like further on the north of the Llanos Basin, what we see is the Carbonera at a different level, how it is changing. The geology as it comes from anastomosing channel system, like a big meandering system and a lot of sand, then going up with the various channels appearing at different level. So you're slicing from 60 millisecond below, 40 millisecond, 20 millisecond, and going above 0, 20. So your reference marker plus above and below. So you're going through a series of slices to understand which channel system finished and then how the lithology changed. So blue usually means, in this case, usually means the shaly part, and the more bright colors mean the sandy part. So you could have a blue channel filled with shale and those things. So what you see now, that one channel cutting across the other channel and possibly making a reservoir closure, which you could be a stratigraphic target. So and then you can use facies to check that channel system, how thick it is, and then do inversion to find out if the channel is filled with sand or not. So there was one study actually from Venezuela, from Maracaibo. I learned stratomagic from Manuel Pupon. Like Manuel Pupon worked for Shell, and he published this study of that amplitude by itself sometimes does not give you all the information what you need. Where waveform facies analysis, if you work through various attributes, you can actually define. This is a big 3D showing the alluvial plains in separating from the coastal plains, and various sand delta coming in, and then going into the embayment or going into the these. And Henry Posamentier talks a lot about that, and as well. So we using these big to really characterizing the facies could give you seismic facies, could give you the geology. So the perspective, it's important to have the perspective when you're exploring that what kind of system you're in. Like otherwise, the porosities would change depending on how far you're from the coastline, and various deposition, diagenesis, all things will change. So that's what he's trying to show with using this terminology. And one of the beautiful in Llanos Basin, you can see the system of the point bar system, very detailed in the various from the inversion and from the spectral decomposition, putting it together would show how these systems are working. Now, is it hydrocarbon bearing or not? That comes after the closures and those. But again, the understanding that what system you're dealing with, it becomes really important, especially along the faults and those. More closely, if you look at that point bar, you can, in the facies analysis, you can say that that is the shaly sand versus the point bars changing as you have the sand accumulation at the curve, usually at the curve as it accumulates and then bypasses. So you have a straight line which bypasses, and then you have the second lobes here. So these are quite extensive, like they are 5 kilometer wide, the river system. So understanding the scale becomes the really important, or geomorphology. Another example of the trapping system, where you have a channel going this way, and then you have other channels. From the spectral decomposition, you can see the shadow of one channel over the others, while in the facies you see this system cut deep into the river and coming into making almost a mini delta system here into the big river. So it's a river or river combination, and or breaching through, and then you have the faulting on the top to make it the trapping systems. So understanding, like, it's going into below the seismic resolution, but again, spectral decomposition gives you it's called visual stacking. So it's a visual stacking over 50 or 100 50 millisecond window. And the same is with the 20, 30 millisecond window of the facies. So you are not looking at one specific amplitude, you're looking at the interval attributes. And so it is more interpretive than quantitative. And then you can bring in the quantitative once you narrow down within certain channel system. Same spectral decomposition in Putumayo Basin. You can see the frequency attenuation because of the oil trapping on the top of these where your actual reservoir has been captured by a very gentle slope, but frequency attributes or spectral decomposition can give you the frequency attenuation which is related, but yellow is not good, while the green are the, which mean you have a lower frequency window. So, and again, integrating all of these together, sometimes 3D visualization with bringing up like called sweetness and various other attributes, combining them together with the energy and dip attributes and faulting and various coherencies together can give you a full understanding. And last, I just want to like comparison or integration. It is always sometime nice to look at them together, how they relate to each other. It's like sometimes you just run it as a GIF image or a movie to see and how things are changing structurally as well as stratigraphic. So understanding the stratigraphy or reservoir attitude, where the sands are going to come, where the lithic channels are cutting through, where the possible capture of thing is going beyond the structural analysis only. And that is where the next phase of the Llanos Basin doing and various in all basins. In Canada, we do mostly stratigraphic because we don't have faults. Most of us don't have faults. It's basically unconformities. So that is where the whole of these four-land basin with the high changes in stratigraphy could yield to like integration is the key for quantitative and attribute work. So that's, I want to just recap, like, we looked at the calibrated AVO analysis, rock physics, inversion, fault detection, and then chimney detection to finding the seal and migration pathways. They're all various methods to investigate the seismic and the understanding 2D, 3D, combining them together, and source rock analysis, putting the rock physics back into the real, and then pore pressure prediction or integrating all of these together. That's what I believe that's a working in many of the places in Colombia and in Ecuador, Argentina, and so is Venezuela. I mean, I know we haven't worked much in Venezuela, but we will look forward to. And it's, I believe all these Llanos, what is applies, it goes a lot in Venezuela. And you guys are, many of you are from there. Look forward to. And muchas gracias for the and thanks Gabriel again for bringing and these, and I'm excited to give this talk and look forward to what you guys have. Any questions, any preguntas. Yeah, this one Valentina just showed me preguntas.
Muchas gracias, Azer, por tu presentación. You've given us, quite the summary of the different applications of geophysical technologies for oil and gas exploration throughout Latin America. Vamos a tener 5 minutos. Si la gente tiene alguna pregunta, Pepe siempre tiene un comentario. No nos vamos a perder el día de hoy. Azer, él entiende español, pero no lo habla mucho. Él ha trabajado bastante en Latinoamérica y por eso me comentaba que entendía el español. Pueden hacer las preguntas por audio o las pueden escribir y yo las leo. I'm going to kick off with a question. Voy a hacer una pregunta mientras que la gente se prepara. Just you showed us quite a few successful examples of AVO and other technologies, but what are those pitfalls and what are those things that people, those mistakes that people or we continue to make that that sometimes we fail when we apply these technologies and we get not so good wells. Azer.
Yeah.
What are those common pitfalls that we keep coming back to
the common pitfall is not because we cut shortcuts. Like we are always trying to make shortcuts, and because we don't have time, we thought the service project is not enough, and the processing got too much long, and then you don't want to go back, and then so back and forth. It's more about not asking enough questions to the client sometime, and so sometimes you're not actually looking at the data, you're working with the data, which is not giving you the answers, but you still have to take the answers to your management. So most of the work is comes into what is your, that's why I say human bias and saying, okay, well, I am too optimistic. If I go too pessimistic, they will not drill this well. And then if you drill the well and then the answers, you're not accepting it. So it's ego plus data is not showing. So like as I showed before, that wet AVO is also AVO. Like, so it's a AVO signature, which normally if you go back and they only show class 3 AVO, that is not what you want to see. Class 3 AVO is only for a certain specific 20 to 30% porosity with a good gas sand, with a shale sitting on the top. But that is not what you really get. You get a good AVO, you get a bad AVO right below it, you get a multiple, right, making an AVO. Yeah, I used to show a good example from Canada. It's like from Wilrich. Wilrich is sitting below the two very strong coals. So that coals create a multiple which comes at the farther offset. So it looks a very good, and Wilrich become now the big play, and it's been putting. I always want to show that it was successful, but it was not AVO. So it is like, because you drill for a wrong reason, like you drill for AVO, but it was not, that was a multiple which you were drilling, but then it end up failing. So sometimes you get a bad, like, you say, okay, you got successful in 1 well, 2 well, 3 well, and then you find out that was, I was drilling multiple. So I keep on drilling the multiple. So it's not, from the understanding, and that's why we are very fortunate that we go back to the clients, and actually we did get the projects when the client failed as well, that, okay, look at it now. That's what happened here. So that's where we found out that there could be very much variations. What is the sitting on the top, base, and that's why now we are doing a much more detailed rock physics analysis, modeling, trying to model everything. Because if you go with the seismic only and say, okay, yeah, well, it matches with this well or my template well, that is not the same. You have to get the geology in. You have to understand the geology, and that is, I think, where we're going. We still have, we will always be failing, and we're coming back and failing again. But that is the cycle where you learn, but you're reducing the risk. Remember, by not doing anything, you're not reducing, you're not learning, because your learning curve is by falling. Like, by falling, you pick up and then you learn. So it is not like there is no saying that I did this wrong a while ago. I always go back to my example in my geology class when we didn't have geophysics degree. Like, so they asked me what is the difference between VP and VS. And I had no idea. So it was the geophysics course in the Viva of the geophysics class. I didn't know between P and S because I left my seismic for the gravity and magnetic. So I was doing gravity and magnetic, so I didn't have the, so it's always, you're always learning. You go back to the this and then come back to learn. So there is a lot of pitfalls, but we can't explain all of it. But yes, one of it is the wet sand AVO. So
Great, great. Yep. So we don't have any questions. No tenemos preguntas de la audiencia el día de hoy. Azer, I would like to thank you for being today here on behalf of the Sociedad Venezolana de Ingenieros Geofísicos. We hope to see you back here sometime, maybe in 2024, to show us some of those cool examples for geophysical applications for oil and gas exploration. Muchísimas gracias. Would you like to leave your email address on the chat or put it on the slide in case somebody wants to reach you?
Okay.
Azer va a dejar el correo electrónico de él en la pantalla en caso de que alguien quiera contactarlo. Pepe siempre tiene algún comentario. Pepe, no te puedes ir sin hacer algún comentario hoy.
No, I just want to thank Azer. Very nice talk. International movement is nice. You came to talk to us. I was in Pakistan 2 or 3 times in Karachi, talking to PPL, teaching them some courses on the matter of quantitative seismic. And I want to remind Gabriel that he was sleeping on a talk of this same society called Pitfalls in Quantitative Interpretation. And he was sleeping. Okay.
Oh, I was sleeping. No, I was probably reading something.
Yeah,
No,
he was
with
sleeping.
Jaime Checa or no?
Yeah. No, I said just one comment, one technical comment that always come out, and that is maybe very hard for us. Has to do with thickness again of reservoirs, primarily when you have multiple stacked sands or reservoirs. Because we have very nice papers and we produce very nice papers and spectral decomposition and AVO when you have kind of a blocky type or, separate reservoirs. I was just working in a project at the lower, well, one of those beam, the Valley of Magdalena. And there was a lot of stacked thin reservoirs. And the response was very bad because you also have like a peak frequency of 16 hertz, 16, not 60, okay, 16.
Yeah.
And so that's, when we're talking about limitations, our limitations have to do with the data, the quality of the data, and the type of reservoir. So
yeah, that is where modeling. Go ahead. Yeah, finish your.
No, I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. I think you show a very nice set of examples of many things.
Yeah. So yeah, coming to stack reservoirs, you are trying to tune to understand the tuning, like which one is really going to tune any of these sands. It could be the multiple sands can actually create results which are bad. So that's where rock physics comes in. Like, you always have to model, see your response at 30 degree, at 45 degree, at 60 degree, what is actually doing with the velocities, what is going on with the impedances, like what is sitting on the top, is it sand over sand, is it shale over sand? Yes, even with the all the analysis, usually you can stick to one thick sand and see if it is trapped, and then assuming that others will be possibly trapped, but that is one indicator. So that's why if we go into higher frequency, we cannot sometime restore the amplitude. So that is where the problem comes in. Can you still keep the amplitude? And a lot of people are trying with the spectral, spectral enhancement and whitening and those things. But once you come together, there is some real frequencies, and that is where you have to deal with. But there is a shape thing, there is like things you can do by stacking and coming with the results, but you need to really not go back and clean up your gathers and make sure they're matched with the model so that when you can stack and then you can rely on it. You can add the frequencies and those, and there are very new, very good, Castania have and various others have. We used to have in Tricon as well, the X-Freak and those. So those are all things afterward, but you have to look at the gathers, because if you don't look at the gathers, you're missing the, half of the story. Like, say, oh yeah, well, I can make things up because it's by just combining. So multiple sands, yes, there is always problem with the multiple thin. And now there is a new papers by some of the author from Norway, and they have a patent on it. Like, it's called saturation analysis. So you can actually do a full saturation analysis. But again, data have to be not 16 hertz is what only you're going to get a flash of big reservoir, which is probably what you're looking for. You're not looking for those thin sands if you're looking at a big play. But depending on how big the play is, here we are dealing with 1 BCF reservoir. 1, 2 BCF, it's enough for you, or you have a 100,000 barrel as a one pocket. So in Canada, like, we're dealing with the 100,000 barrel. But it all depends on the scale. And yes, we try our best to make sure that we see everything together. Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I worked for PPL that was my first job before I came to Stanford to do geophysics. So I was PPL, and I did go back to PPL. Actually, the processing issues are a lot because South Indian, basically. Anyway, some other time we will talk, hopefully.
Cool.
Yeah, good people there. Good people.
Very good.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Azer, again, on behalf of the Sociedad Venezolana de Ingenieros Geofísicos. Y muchas gracias a todos los asistentes. Y nos vemos el mes que viene con la primera serie de trabajos de tesis de los estudiantes de Geofísica de la Universidad Simón Bolívar. Que tengan buenas tardes y buen provecho los que no han almorzado.
Buenas tardes. Gracias.
Chao, Pepe.
Bye-bye.